Hello friends, and welcome back to Turkish Spotlight Secrets. Before we dive into today's story, tap subscribe and give this video a like if you enjoy these deep dives into the human moments behind the spotlight. Your support keeps this community going. Thank you. Now, let me take you to a day that began like any other but became one of the most fragile, unforgettable chapters in the lives of Ozan Akbaba and Sinem. It was meant to be a routine shoot for their new series, a project fans had been buzzing about for weeks. The set hummed with familiar rhythms, lights warming up, camera crews checking angles, makeup artists perfecting final details. Sinem arrived with her usual gentle smile, the kind that makes everyone breathe a little easier. She greeted the team one by one, skimmed her pages, ran through a few lines under her breath, and reached for green tea in a paper cup. Ozan stood nearby, joking with the focus puller, radiating that grounded ease he's known for. Nothing hinted at what the day would soon bring. The clock moved toward a short break, a pause between takes, the kind of lull where the air feels still. And that was when everything changed. A production assistant approached Sinem with a phone and a quiet urgency that didn't match the calm of the moment. There was a murmur, a nod, and then Sinem stepped off to a corner near the wardrobe racks, away from the noise of the set. Those who were close enough say the first seconds felt normal. Hello? A breath. Another silence. And then, a collapse no one saw coming. Her face drained of color as if a wave of cold had rushed through her. Her shoulders stiffened, the phone slipped from her fingers, striking the floor with a sound that cut through the room. For a heartbeat, she stood motionless, as if trying to make sense of the sentence that had just erased the morning. Then the stillness snapped. Tears burst forward, raw and unstoppable, the kind of tears that rip past every careful boundary, and a soft, fractured sound left her lips that no script could ever imitate. Ozan reached her in an instant. He had been watching, sensing the shift before most others, and now he folded around her like an anchor, steadying her shaking hands. "I'm here," he said, barely above a whisper, and the shock in his eyes softened into fierce concern. People nearby went quiet, instinctively stepping back, giving them space. The director lowered his headset and signaled for a full stop, not a pause, the kind of halt that tells everyone this is no longer about work. Crew members gently redirected the scene lights away. A friend from wardrobe guided Sinem toward her dressing room, while Ozan kept pace at her side, guarding her from stray glances and murmurs. It felt like the entire set had exhaled at once and then refused to breathe, the energy dissolving into a heavy stillness. Within minutes, practical details took shape in whispers. Drivers were called. The plan shifted from scripts and frames to blankets and phone calls and a quiet path to the car. No one asked for explanations, no one dared. You could only hear the soft shuffle of shoes and the humble sounds of people who know when to step aside. Behind closed doors, Sinem held onto Ozan's hand with the strength of someone clinging to the only thing keeping her upright. And while the crew waited in silence, remembering their own losses, the director made it final: production would be suspended for as long as needed. The set had become less a workplace and more a sanctuary, and everyone seemed to understand that this was not just another day. What happened was simple and impossible at once. Sinem had learned, in that unguarded minute, that a close family member from her childhood, a person who had shaped the earliest corners of her dreams, had passed away. This was the person who had watched her memorize lines with shy determination, who had slipped her bus fare for auditions without being asked, who had always called her our brave one. The news found her in the most public place imaginable and still hit with such intimacy that it made the air feel private. Grief happens when it wants to, and it arrived in the middle of her workday, when she was already carrying the weight of a demanding shoot. Friends on set said she had been pushing herself for weeks, living on early mornings and late wraps, giving the kind of performance that demands you pour from your deepest places. If there is ever a good time for loss, and there isn't, this was not it. Ozan's response spoke not as a co-star first, but as the partner who knows her rhythms, her needs, the way her voice dips when she's spent. He cancelled every plan he had for the day without a second thought. He became that quiet, unwavering presence, the person who keeps time moving in manageable moments when everything else refuses to make sense. He shielded her from cameras, kept the corridor clear, and refused to let anyone press for answers. He made sure there was water, checked that the car would meet them by a more discreet exit, and stood there, absorbing what he could of the storm that had broken over her. It was practical and tender, a kind of care that does not need to be grand to be profound. When word inevitably seeped out that production had halted for personal reasons, fans who saw a few distant photos of them leaving, heads bowed, fingers interlaced, called it what it was, love in motion. In the days that followed, silence fell over Sinem's social media. It was the kind of pause that speaks louder than any caption could, and it made fans instinctively soften their tone. Instead of demanding updates, they offered quiet blankets of compassion. Messages poured in like warm light under a door: "We're with you, take your time, he's keeping you strong, we see you even if you're off the grid." Fellow actors and industry friends sent notes too, not as polished statements but as human offerings, memories of shared scenes, acknowledgments of her kindness, prayers that she would rest as much as she needed. Without fanfare, a community gathered around her across screens and cities, and it felt like the glossy surface of entertainment cracked just enough to reveal the beating heart beneath. Away from spotlights, Sinem did what so many do when the ground gives way: she went home. Interviews and events were quietly cancelled. A premiere was postponed without a new date. There was no spectacle, no drama, no grand speech. She returned to her hometown with Ozan close at her side and joined her family in arranging a farewell that belonged only to them. There were no reporters, no lenses glinting at the edge of grief. There were simply photographs laid on a table, time-worn stories told for the 10th time because they make it easier to breathe, embraces that last longer than usual, and a shared understanding that someone irreplaceable had left a shape in the air that would never vanish. A family friend later said Sinem seemed shattered and steady all at once, like a person who understands that healing isn't a staircase but a shoreline. She would not rush her return. She would go back to work when she could be present again, not a day earlier. Weeks passed. A certain stillness wrapped itself around their world. You could feel it in the way Ozan stepped out alone to pick up groceries without saying much, in the way he drew curtains at dusk so the evening felt softer, in the brief nod he offered photographers to say, "Please, let this part be ours." And then one morning, quietly, without announcement, Sinem returned to set. The crew had heard she might come, but no one knew for certain until she walked onto the soundstage with that deliberate, gentle step that has become her signature. She brought flowers for the makeup room, she greeted the extras, she hugged the assistant who had brought her that call weeks earlier. The director did not cue the day with a speech. Instead, when she appeared on the floor for rehearsal, everyone simply broke into applause, warm, steady, unhurried. She stood there for a second, surprised by the sound, and in that breath she looked toward the rafters where the lights hang, toward the pale square of daylight that sneaks in through the high window. Something passed over her face, a flicker of devotion. She sent her eyes skyward and whispered something no one else could hear. Perhaps it was a promise. Perhaps it was a thank you. And then she stepped into her mark. The scene they filmed wasn't meant to be grand, but when the cameras rolled and she spoke, something had shifted. The words felt fuller, the pauses more honest, the gaze steady in a way that comes only when you've met yourself in a hard place and decided not to look away. People on set later said that watching her was like hearing a favorite song in a new arrangement, everything familiar, and yet something deeper thrumming beneath it. Critics who had seen early cuts of the series noticed it too. They wrote about the quiet intensity arriving in her latest scenes, about a core of truth that made even the softest dialogue land with weight. But the praise, while kind, wasn't the point. What mattered more, what made the air almost hum, was the strength it took for her to come back at all. There is a certain kind of courage that does not look like a grand gesture. It looks like showing up with your heart still tender and doing your job with care. It looks like acknowledging your pain and letting it transform you into someone more open, not more closed. And it looks like the way she carried that memory with her from the moment she stepped on set to the moment she went home, her loss neither hidden nor exploited, just present in the way real life always is. Around her, you could feel the change. The set became gentler, the days more mindful. People remembered to ask real questions. Are you sleeping? Do you need a minute? Ozan kept a careful eye on pace, regularly checking with the director to make sure the schedule breathed. He adjusted the rhythm of his own performance to match hers, protecting her in the spaces no one sees. Off camera, he started a small ritual. He'd walk her to the stage first, then back to the dressing room after each setup, 2 tiny journeys that made a mountain feel like a set of steps. Between takes, they didn't always talk. Sometimes they just shared a chair in silence, letting that be enough. When laughter returned, and it did, in small, surprising bursts, it felt like sunlight sneaking past heavy clouds. Those who witnessed it said you could almost watch love doing its everyday work, not glamorous but essential. Fans recognized that work too. Without the frantic swirl of speculation, they allowed the couple room to be human. And still, life continued around them, as it always does. Scripts were revised with care. Scenes were shuffled to meet her where she was. There were days when Sinem felt strong and days when she didn't, days when the makeup brush trembled and days when it didn't matter. Through it all, Ozan moved like a quiet current, bringing tea, keeping jokes short, stepping in when someone asked for too much, stepping back when she just needed to stand alone. Their bond, already deep, seemed to settle into something even steadier, like a bridge reinforced under pressure. If anyone thought this would weaken them, they misread the way certain fires forge. In time, the memory of the person she lost found its place not as a wound alone, but as a guiding light. Scenes took on new meanings. Dialogue meant different things. The costume she wore for one especially intimate moment on screen was chosen because the fabric reminded her of a scarf she used to borrow as a child. Details like that, quiet and private, threaded themselves through her work like stitches. You could feel it in the choices she made, a pause before a line that hadn't been there before, a softening of the voice, a courage that allowed vulnerability to stand right where once a polished veneer had been. This wasn't about turning pain into content. It was about honoring what had shaped her by letting it shape the art too, carefully and with respect. And so the story of that day, the day a routine shoot cracked open into something infinitely more tender, became another part of who Sinem is and of who Ozan is beside her. It changed the temperature of the set, yes, but it also reminded everyone who watched that even within the bright machinery of show business, hearts are beating and breakable. The applause on the day she returned wasn't really for a performance at all. It was for endurance. It was for honesty. It was for all the people who have ever had to take a phone call that turns a weekday into the before and after of a life, and then, somehow, find a way to continue. Thank you for staying with us to the end of this video on Turkish Spotlight Secrets. If this story moved you, keep Sinem Ünsal and Ozan Akbaba in your thoughts as they navigate grief with grace and hold fast to each other. We'll be here to follow their journey with care, not just because they are stars, but because they are people. Be kind to yourselves, hold your loved ones close, and we'll meet again in the next one. Take care, and goodbye for now.